Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it is your boy Ryan Thomas here with Failtech, and today I'm going to be talking about owning a Retina MacBook Pro in 2016, or specifically my late 2012. Now this is possibly going to work for the early 2013 and later models, but I'm specifically talking about my one, which is the late 2012. So what I'm going to say is basically what I love about it, what I hate about it, what I recommend you should, maybe I should recommend you should buy it, or maybe not, I'm not sure. We'll get into it and let's see what happens. So first off, what about the specs? Well, my one is kitted out with a 13.3 inch model, so you could go for the 15.4 inch model, but I've got the 13.3. 13.3 comes with a 2560 by 1600 screen, which I'll get into a little bit later on, a 2.5 GHz dual core i5 processor, 8GB of RAM and 128GB of PCI Express SSD storage, and I'll get into a little bit more about that later, what that means, and also the different configurations you can get. So that's what my specs are at the moment. For ports, we've got two Thunderbolt 1.0, we've got one MagSafe 2 connector, we've got two USB 3.0 ports, which is very quick, like the Thunderbolt ones. We've also got a 3.5 in and out combo jack, so not separate for this one, and we've also got HDMI. The lack of USB ports is kind of annoying, which means you probably want to have to get a hub. The Thunderbolt is really cool because it means you've got two mini DisplayPort ports, but actually I haven't found a use for Thunderbolt yet, that is, because I do want to extend my displays. The MagSafe 2 connector is really cool because I had an original MacBook which had a MagSafe 1 port, and I really like MagSafe 2. It's a bit thinner, which means it actually works better when you're pulling away the cable. And MagSafe is basically designed so that when you pull a cable by accident, it actually is magnetic, so your charger cable will just kind of fling off and your laptop won't go anywhere, which has really saved my bacon sometimes. The HDMI port works, but it's definitely not 1.4, 1.2, whatever it is, because it can only go up to 1080p. I've connected up to my 4K TV in the other room and it just doesn't work. So this is definitely limited to 1080p. Okay, so let's talk about the build quality. As with any of Apple products, it's amazing. It uses a full aluminium unibody, which means that it basically feels like one solid bit of aluminium. You've only got the screen that isn't metal. I'm not sure what material that is on the screen, but it feels a little bit like glass, but it probably isn't glass at this form factor. Along with the form factor, it's 13.3 inches, so it's a perfect size laptop for me. I would have gone for the 15-inch MacBook Pro, but I wanted to go for the 13-inch because actually although it did save me £100, which was definitely a bonus. The small laptop that's like really powerful, obviously it's more like a sleeper, and secondly it's just so much easier to carry. I fling this in my backpack with the rest of my stuff and it's just so easy to carry. It's a 13.3 inch. I really prefer this. My MacBook, original white MacBook, was actually 13.3 inch as well, but that only had a resolution of 1280 by 800 as opposed to 2560 by 1600, which is a good segue into the screen. It is a 2560 by 1600 resolution, which is much higher than 1080p. It's difficult because you can get an application to perfectly scale that so that everything is running at its native resolution, but I wouldn't recommend it because everything looks absolutely tiny. If you leave it at the maximum scaled resolution that you can do via Apple's own software, it just looks fine. It replicates 1680 by 1050 or something similar along those lines. A 16 by 10 aspect ratio is really useful, especially when you're working with Photoshop or anything that's kind of requires more vertical space, because actually you have got more vertical resolution. It's not as typical 16 by 9. It wouldn't be, 1080p, it would be 1200p, and this so happens to be 1600p. And such a high resolution in such a small screen is actually really good, and everything looks really sharp. I've only got 1 or 2 dead pixels, but when your pixels are so small, it's kind of difficult to tell. The keyboard is a lovely keyboard. Actually, it's one of my favourite keyboards I've ever used. Unfortunately, there's no numpad, but it is a chiclet style backlit keyboard. It's fully backlit. Every single key is individually backlit, and it looks stunning. Now, my model actually did, although I bought it in the UK, it actually came with an American keyboard, and I've come to love the American style keyboard, and actually now I prefer it to the British style of keyboard. That's just because of the layout and things. The only thing I do miss from the UK keyboard is the nice long enter button on the end, because it is actually short, kind of almost like a shift key in the UK. The trackpad is actually renowned as being one of the best trackpads in the world on any laptop. This hasn't got Force Touch, but it is the original kind of glass, frosted glass trackpad, and it's really nice. Got multi-touch gestures, just like you see on iPhones and iPads, which is really useful. And funny story, I was using this to edit one of the Galaxy S6 video that you saw, and actually I plugged in a mouse and found out that I actually prefer the trackpad to the mouse. The trackpad is absolutely glorious on this thing. It's nice and big, it responds well, multi-touch is perfect, and you don't have to click into it. You can actually just touch it like you would on a touchscreen, like any other really trackpad, and it works really well. The webcam is a 720p affair, and it's not that good. In fact, I'll insert some test footage here. Not very good. Not very good in low light whatsoever. But it's not actually that good, as you can tell. I mean, it's better than the new 12-inch MacBook, but it's still, you're not going to be producing professional video with this thing or anything. Now, like I said, I did get the 128GB model, which is very, very quick, don't get me wrong, because it's PCI Express flash storage, which means it's not your standard SATA, and it is a very, very fast drive. But actually, if you push higher than that and you get the 256 or 512, that actually does boost the SSD in performance. Not because of its extra size, but I think they must use a different model of SSD because it actually is much faster if you go up for the 256 or the 512GB model. Now, I did want to buy one of these, and I was aware of this when purchasing this laptop, but it was an extra £100 for me at the time, and I really didn't want to spend an extra £100 for effectively a decent amount, not £100 extra performance by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so what about the battery life? Now, the battery life was very, very good when I first got it, but it started to deteriorate now, and that's because it's just an older battery. Like I said, this laptop did come out in 2012, and so, I mean, it's 4 years old, well, almost 4 years old. And the battery, you can tell, just degrades slightly. Now, you can get it replaced by Apple for £100, which is absolutely fine, but instead of buying a new laptop, but it's just not a removable battery, which is a bit annoying, which means you kind of have to get it serviced by Apple, otherwise it's not going to work very well. And I think one of my last points is actually the efficiency of the software. Of course, this is using Mac OS X, or what it's now just called OS X, and I'm running El Capitan on it. And actually, the software that I use to edit most of my videos now is Final Cut Pro 10. It is way more streamlined, way more efficient, and way more powerful than pretty much anything I use. The only thing I use that is actually more powerful than that is Premiere Pro, but the Premiere Pro is nowhere near as streamlined. Now, my computer, my beast desktop that I always used to go on about, can basically work through 4K at like 2 FPS, and is very, very slow. And that thing's got a 6-core Extreme Edition, 8GB of RAM, and a 780 Ti. Now, my laptop, which has 8GB of RAM, very similar, but a dual-core laptop grade 2.5 GHz i5 and onboard graphics, although 1.5GB of it, onboard graphics, tears through 4K like it's nothing. It works absolutely flawlessly, and I just can't thank it enough for this. Can't thank my laptop enough for this. Now, that's basically it. The software is just more efficient. Okay, so the price and why did I buy it? Well, actually, it was £670, and it's a 13-inch model. It's my favourite laptop I've ever used in my life. I have used a 15-inch model of this, and don't get me wrong, it's a lovely laptop, but it's just a bit too chunky. It's just a bit big, although they are ridiculously thin and light laptops. And it's definitely not the most powerful laptop I've ever used, with one I used quite recently with a quad, Core i7 laptop grade CPU in there, and then also a single 980M GPU. That's very, very quick, right? But I just love this laptop. It's so thin, it's so light. I love OS X. It is the best laptop I've ever used in terms of for me, and I don't think I'm going to be replacing it anytime soon, guys. In fact, that actually will probably replace my desktop in the full-time setup, and it might even have a place on its own shelf. So there we go, guys. I'm just going to keep that going there. Now, would I recommend it? If you like Apple, and you want to get a MacBook Pro, get a late 2012 Retina. It's the first Retina they came out with. They are amazing. If you don't like Apple and you've come here just to hate on Apple, then by all means do so. I'll probably remove your comment because, this is not a place for negativity, guys. Although I could give a negative review. There's just something about it that makes me love it. Just the laptop in general, it's just its character, it's just the way it was built. And that sounds absolutely stupid, right, for someone to say that about technology, but I absolutely love it, and I wouldn't swap out for any other laptop. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully that's kind of made your decision or given you some more insight into what it's like owning one of these things. I bought it just over a year ago, and I used it through and actually got my GCSE in graphic design using this laptop. So actually kind of cool. Anyway, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.